We've all seen the pretty signs and cutesy favors on Pinterest, but how far do you want to go with the DIY projects? And what are the pros and cons? This sounds like it's going to be a good one.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a good one, especially for the person over here who is maybe not a huge arts and crafts person.
Are you talking about yourself?
And you?
Maybe. I mean, I am struggling with the coloring books right now.
Yeah, you have a hard time staying in between the lines.
I blame it on it on Chloe, but
I saw you.
It's hard.
I saw you.
It's hard.
I know.
It's the giant crayons that you've purchased. Like,
yeah,
they're
this
too big.
might be the hippie side of me that purchased honey sticks instead of regular Crayolas.
Yeah,
that could be causing.
I mean,
it. You're not
they
wrong.
smell great.
Oh my gosh, they smell good.
And they're awesome crayons. They're just not exact.
I thought you were gonna say they tasted good.
We're not
which
there yet.
concerned me.
Maybe later.
Or the powder finger paint that I bought. That's
yeah, that was a step too far.
It was definitely a step too far. I'm not quite so sure about that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Yeah, we're not so much in the arts and crafts.
No.
And I like to think that I'm DIY, but I'm not DIY.
Oh, honey.
Yeah. Yeah. The baby gates are up though.
Bless your heart.
She's like 14 now, but the baby gates are finally up.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Should we talk about, wedding DIY
Oh
stuff?
my God, are we recording? I thought we were just talking about arts and crafts.
Who knew?
Yeah. Weird. All right. Well, let's go with it. So first we'll talk about DIY ideas.
Cool.
It's something that everyone talks about. I think to a degree, everyone wants to do something.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Whether it's not very much or it's overboard, city. But I guess
it doesn't seem like there's ever a medium ground.
No, there's not.
It's one or the other.
Yeah, it's completely unreasonable.
Yeah, like either like you did like one thing or you just went crazy.
Right, exactly. You ordered koozies or you completely made, your entire centerpieces out of like paper mache.
Yeah, which is impressive.
Right. Well, maybe.
I've also seen Pinterest fails one too many times.
Right,
so.
Yeah. So what DIY projects do you see most often? Is it paper mache centerpieces?
Less popular as it turns out.
It's a trend. I can feel it.
Yeah. Signage is the biggest thing I see.
Okay.
Any kind of paper goods. I mean, we see everything from just having like a welcome sign to having a sign for every single table. So, hashtags, signature drinks, guest book, gifts and cards. I'm probably forgetting some. Unplugged, program signs. So those are the most popular. Table numbers, that's another one that, typically people either DIY or buy from Etsy, and then seating chart too. So like really those paper goods is what you see most often that people are kind of either DIYing themselves, and I've seen some people create some pretty cool stuff, or buying off Etsy and kind of making their own.
Well, what's the coolest thing you've seen?
I had somebody who made like a lot of stuff out of like wood, like all of their like signature stuff out of like they made
like
it.
Whittling?
Less so like whittling, more so like woodworking. We had a couple too whose dad created like a huge wooden cross for their ceremony.
Oh wow!
So that was pretty cool. So different things like that.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what projects do you think are reasonable to undertake?
It depends on how busy you are.
Sure.
So if you have like a super busy job and a super crazy life and you travel all the time, then I would say like 1. If your job is not super crazy and you have a lot of free time, then, maybe 3 or 4.
Putting stamps on the invitations, is that considered DIY?
Sometimes. I mean, geez, that can take a long time all on its own. It just depends on how busy you are and how like big of the project. Like, are we talking about putting stamps on invitations? Are we talking about like, assembling favors? Or are we talking about like doing like a huge undertaking, like creating like paper mache centerpieces? So it depends on how big the project is and how much time you have. I would say like, if you think you're going to do multiple projects, you kind of want to think about like how you're going to break that up and maybe like do one project and then see how that turned out before you commit to doing like 7 or 8.
Right. Now that makes sense. And it's just not even it's not even just putting it together. It's the day of, which we'll get into in a bit. But
Yeah.
what are some DIY projects that you've seen go very wrong? That was kind of creepy.
Well, thanks. I don't know. I think centerpieces is probably the number one thing that we see go wrong.
Interesting.
There's a reason that people do flowers as their centerpieces and use a professional florist. So probably that one is the number one thing that I've seen.
Can you talk about one, or no? You don't want to. You're going to protect the innocent.
I'm going to protect the innocent.
Or less innocent, I guess.
No, I'm going to protect the innocent.
All right. I'm going to get you at some point.
That's fine.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the pros and cons of DIY.
Yeah.
So why would someone DIY?
Money. It saves money on the budget. Specifically, centerpieces is probably the biggest one that people decide that they can save money on. In theory, it saves money, especially centerpieces. I think sometimes the people don't think about like the cost of like setup and breakdown and messing up and all that good stuff. Time to, how much that costs you, but saving money. And then also another big reason to do it is to personalize it. Maybe you're sick of seeing the same thing over and over again, and you really want to do something cool. Maybe you have like a really cool, like hobby. I mean, I've had people who make their own furniture, or, like maybe that's like what you do professionally. So you want to make sure that you incorporate that. So it can help to personalize your day a lot too when you do DIY things.
Yeah, no. And to me, like that would be the exciting thing, is kind of bringing in like your relationship and things that you couldn't, buy at a store. So
yeah. And I think it's cool to do that. I would just make sure you do that in like a small way, because if you commit to like making like a big cross and a couch and a bunch of signs, like that's a lot of work. And by the time a wedding comes, you're just going to be exhausted, and that's not fun.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
So why should someone not do DIY?
Time. It takes a lot of time. Especially, you want it to look good, and it's going to be photographed and all your friends and family are going to see it. And then, also thinking about like setup and breakdown on wedding day. So even if you have somebody to physically set it up and break it down, like who's taking it home at the end of the night? Like, do you have to have a U-Haul truck for all of this stuff? Like, how is the logistics of DIYing going to work for you? So you really want to think about that before you commit to too much.
Okay. So looking at the timeline, if you decide to do a DIY project, when should you start that?
While you're listening to this podcast right now.
Right now. Hit pause.
Go
to Michael's.
And get started.
Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously, you want to start like as soon as possible. Like I think about like anytime I've tried to undertake a DIY project, I'm like, oh yeah, that'll take no time. I'll do that quickly. I mean, I did that for our wedding. I was like, yeah, I'll do DIY all this stuff. And then the week of the wedding, I was like, all right, well, this project's out. Yep. We're not having menu cards. Like, you don't want that to happen. So start now. Like I said, do one project, see how long it took you. Do your number one DIY project. Like if you could only do one, what would it be? I
like that. That's a great idea.
Get that done. And then see, like, do I have 6 months left? Great. Let's knock out another DIY project. Do I have 2 days left? Probably not going to happen. So knock out like your biggest project first, and your number one project. And then you can decide, how many more of those things you can take on. You might realize like, whoa, this was way bigger investment than I really wanted to make. Or you might realize like, oh my God, I love this. I'm going to do everything else DIY for my wedding. And then I'm going to do more stuff after it. And, maybe you found a new passion, but, yeah, start now is my long story to tell you that.
Yeah, it's funny. This is not wedding day related, but when you started Something Perfect a couple moons ago, I remember when you did your first bridal show and you DIY'd the backdrop, and that thing looked awesome.
It did,
but it took forever.
I had to bribe a lot of people with pizza and wine to help me. Like
there
a
still
lot.
Wasn't enough.
There wasn't enough people, or there wasn't enough people, pizza and wine?
Pizza and wine, or people, actually. all of the above.
It's a good thing our friends and family love me.
Yeah. And then it was for me, it was the setup of it.
Yeah.
that's the other thing you have to really think about here when you're doing a DIY project is how does it affect my setup and my timeline there?
Yeah. And it's not even so much like who sets it up. It's like the timeline, like you mentioned, like how long it's going to take, because setting up like your centerpiece, for instance, maybe you have like, you know, a tree stump, and then you have like a thing that goes on a lantern, and then you have like, you know, a couple of different candles, and then you have to fill the candles with water, and then, you know, you have all these different things.
Oh wait, where do I fill it?
Where's the water source?
Yep. That's heavy now that the glass is full.
Are there price tags on everything that have to come off?
Oh, yeah.
So there's just like, you don't think about it, but like that alone could take you, you know, 20 minutes per table.
Right.
So
times 10 tables.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of setup time.
Yeah.
And so it's not even the restriction of like who sets it up, but like, what if your venue only allows you to get in 2 hours before? How you do that math? You're not going to have time.
Yeah.
Unless you bring in like a team of like, you know, 12.
Right.
So the setup time alone is definitely a detractor of doing DIY. That's why like I love like doing like DIY signs or like table numbers or like things that you are already going to do that can easily get set up in that time period.
Sure.
And maybe like one signature DIY piece that's not going to take, you know, too long to set up.
Yeah.
Or break down.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because when you are DIYing it, like it's just the setup is going to be much different than with something that people have done a million times before.
For sure.
And then one more question for you: when you are kind of going back to the other one, you know, when you are setting out to do your DIY projects,
Yeah.
what kind of deadline do you give yourself? Like at this particular moment in the planning process, I have to be completely done.
I would aim to have it done, you know, a couple weeks before your wedding, but at the latest 1 week before your wedding.
Yeah.
Because 1 week before your wedding is crazy. A, you're trying to usually wrap up work. And then, you know, B, you have like friends and family coming in. Everybody wants to see you.
Right.
You're trying to finish up wedding prep and make sure you have everything, and you're boxing everything up, and you're getting your gifts wrapped, and and you're like stressed. Like there's just so many pieces of it that like you don't want like, you know, I can't hang out with you because I'm sitting at home trying to figure out, you know, how to put my fans together for my programs. Like that's not fun for people. So you want to make sure that you kind of have that done at least 1 week before the wedding.
Okay, perfect. So then, as always, to kind of wrap up here, what are the key takeaways that our couples should glean from all of this?
Start small. Pick that one priority project and get it done. See how long it takes you, how you feel about it, if you liked it, if you hated it. Make sure that you give yourself enough time, just in case you have a Pinterest fail and you have to start all over again. And then once you've completed it, make sure that you know how long it's going to take and how it's going to affect your timeline as far as like setup and breakdown time, and make sure you know who's going to be responsible for setting that up. You might assume that your venue's going to set it up, or maybe your planner's going to set it up, or that your mom's not going to mind coming to set it up. But I would say don't make an assumption about that.
Yep.
You need to make sure that it fits in your timeline. You know, you might think mom's going to have all the time in the world on wedding day, but she's not. She's going to want to be with you. She's going to be getting her hair and makeup done. She's not going to want to set up your stuff.
And she's going to be emotional too.
Right. And you're not going to want to set up your stuff. You might think that you're going to, but you're not going to. So, you know, make sure that you've talked to whoever you're hoping is going to set that up, and find out like, how much is this going to cost me to have you set this up? Because that might not be something that person's responsible for. So those are those next steps before you get too far down the DIY path.